On to our next panel discussion, where we just touched on the very edges of the hugely controversial subject of piracy and copyright that's been with us since the beginning of the internet age, and it's as difficult for governments as it is for content producers and for users. And we've got a fascinating panel of guests who are going to come up and join us to discuss that. But as they come up to the stage, we've got a short video that's going to set out some of the main issues surrounding this debate. Now, you are going to hear a familiar voice here, so anybody who is deeply disappointed that they don't have Johnston with them in the flesh will at least know that he's with us in spirit, if not in person, as he explains some of the issues around copyright and piracy, and I invite the panel to come up and join us at the same time.
Few industries have been shaken by the digital revolution as much as the world of entertainment. Less than a decade ago, cinemas and high street record stores were the main sources for our movie and music fixes. Now we can download, stream, view, listen, copy and swap material from around the world, all on the go and on demand. But has the law kept up with this rapidly changing online environment? Is there enough protection against piracy and intellectual property theft? Or is this new digital era allowing artists to thrive and reach wider audiences in a way never before possible? Countries including France, Spain, Italy and New Zealand have proposed legislation designed to tackle online piracy. And we'll all remember earlier this year when some of our favourite websites were dark for 24 hours in protest against SOPA in the United States. The bill, with powers that could have shut down any site associated with piracy, was ultimately withdrawn from Congress. So what about here, in the United Kingdom? Does UK copyright legislation need to change in the digital age? Or is strict legislation a threat to free speech and innovation? How can artists and other rights holders change their business models to adapt to the new digital-first world?
Let me introduce the panel that we have who are going to discuss all of those issues, and I will start at the far end where we have Jeff Taylor, who is here with us as the Chief Executive of the BPI, the association representing major British and independent record labels. He's also the Director of the official UK Charts Company and the Brit Awards. And next to him we have got Spencer Hyman, who's the CEO and founder of ArtFinder, a London-based startup that helps people discover art online. And he's previously been the Chief Operating Officer of Last.fm and the Retail Director of Technology Products for Amazon in Europe. Then we have Graham Linehan, who is a director, writer and actor who is best known for his involvement with Father Ted, Black Books and the IT Crowd. And closest to me here is Brian Message, who's chairman of the Music Managers Forum, an organisation that represents more than 450 of the UK's frontline music artist managers. And he's also Radiohead's manager. Now, I was fascinated to discover a couple of facts I wanted to toss at you just before I ask you the first question. According to the New York Times, 40 billion music files were illegally shared in 2008, and that represents 95% of all music downloads internationally, which I found quite staggering, along with 3/4 of video games released in late 2010 and early 2011 were shared illegally, 3/4 of them. So that inevitably means that creators are losing hope of making a living from their creations, presumably, but we still have to try and find a way to protect intellectual property without hindering online speech and innovation, and that's what we're going to discuss here. Let me ask you first, Graham Linehan, you make your living creating content. You can't do that if you're not paid for it, can you?
No.
So what's the answer to that, in your opinion?
Well, I just like to be paid for it. I really don't know how to... I haven't noticed, since this 95%, I haven't noticed a drop in income. I don't know why that is. So I don't know. Yeah, I haven't really seen... I get, you know... I didn't really come here... I didn't come here as an expert on copyright. I just came here because there are certain things about the way the entertainment industry has been talking to me as a consumer, and I find it offensive. I found it offensive for a number of years. As an artist, I have my own methods of dealing with piracy. I was on Twitter once and I did a search for my show, The IT Crowd, and actually I should face ahead so you can hear me. And someone tweeted, downloading The IT Crowd. And I replied to him and I said, buy it if you like it. And he said, what's it to you? And someone else said, he wrote it, dude. So that kind of conversation is something that I have every so often, and I think that's, I don't know, I think that now we're able to have this more human conversation with people. I don't see why we are constantly resorting to the equivalent of holding a gun to their head and telling them to do what we want them to do. It seems like a very old world. One last point. I think 20 years ago, there was a campaign in The Independent. Before all this became a problem, there was a campaign in The Independent for cheaper CDs. I don't know if anyone remembers it. They did it for a few weeks, and because it was pre-internet, it didn't get up ahead of the scene. And basically, the music industry's response was to the request for cheaper CDs was no. And that was it. End of the conversation. No, we're not reducing the price. Now, the consumers are the ones who are able to say, when they're asked, well, you stop downloading things for free, they're the ones who say no. And I just think that one of the reasons I wanted to do this was to not talk about specific ways of solving this problem, but to suggest that we all start kind of moving on beyond these kind of twin poles where people aren't really talking to each other properly.
Jeff, do you have some specific ways that you in the industry think that we should be addressing this problem?
Well, I think, I've read some of what Graham said about dealing with piracy, and one of the things he's always emphasised is we have to be better than free. We have to have fantastic ways of getting music legally. And for quite a long time, the industry was criticised as too slow. There weren't those services out there. I think we've really turned the corner, certainly for music now. There are more digital music services in the UK than any country in the world, about 80 in the UK. And they're actually going quite well. Spotify's growing very well. Digital album sales are going well. But still, the overall industry's revenue is declining year on year. And our concern is Graham may still be doing fine, but I talk to a lot of session musicians, producers, artists, indie labels, and they're really struggling because albums that used to sell 100,000 copies now sell 30,000 copies, and they don't get re-signed for their next album. So the long-term effects are a real concern. We're not far off, I think, turning a bit of a corner because our digital business is growing so well. But we do have to get to grips with all the people who are making a lot of money out of piracy and get some of that back into the legal business so we can reinvest.
My message is it the responsibility of artists and creators to find ways to monetize their work in this new environment, or is it up to legislation to come in and try and stop people from stealing it?
I think definitely the artists, creators. I'm a professional who works with professional creators, not just superstar acts, as one of the managers of Radiohead and Nick Cave and so on, but also the young ones. And I think what I'm seeing and what we're experiencing is that professional creators have a huge number of opportunities revenue stream-wise. Yes, recorded music might make up a smaller percentage of what's going on, but the language that it's been able to talk to people all over the world, the communication abilities that come through search engines, discovery, is allowing us all to grow a business in a very different way. And I think that is a really exciting thing for us and for creators today. Having that direct access, that sort of one-to-one relationship between artists and consumers, as frictionless as possible, with as few gatekeepers as possible, and then monetizing the relationship. I think that's the nub of it. And I think, we spend so much time in our industry focused on legislation and protection, and really that our game should be about innovation. It should be about creativity, not just musical creativity, but creativity across the spectrum. And that includes the language of how one talks to and monetizes your relationship with your fans.
Does any attempt to legislate or to protect content, is it inevitably going to hinder innovation?
I'm not sure that's the question. I'm not sure that's the question that we should be asking. I think what Brian's saying is the right thing, which is actually more about how is it that you get out there and grab it. I think that, and grab the innovation and try and think about what people can do and how people can do things differently. I mean, copyright is a really odd concept in the digital era. It doesn't really, it wasn't invented for that. It was invented for the printing press. And there's one thing which I'm going to do, David Willis, just want to say. It's a brilliant, if anyone's got Google or Bing or any other search engine open, have a look at something called the Gutenberg parenthesis, because it's a really great argument around what copyright did and why copyright actually has so many problems in the digital era. And what it basically says is that, look, before you had a printing press, everybody could be a performer, and the good performers got paid to do that. And then what happened was you had a printing press, and people who could write really well managed to put great books out there. And then a couple of hundred years later, we invented this thing called copyright, and we have a means of legislating going around it. And books and records and other forms, physical forms, were the way in which creators, artists produced their works and were protected for it. The problem in the digital environment is that it creates a whole new opportunity for people to be able to market and communicate, which muddles this idea of a physical product. And so what Brian is saying is absolutely right, which is the great thing that the internet does is it gives you a whole new different form of actually being able to market and distribute stuff, but at the same time it just challenges fundamental challenges on which all the copyright legislation has been working on. I mean, to me, the most baffling thing about half the copyright debate at the moment is that nobody talks around search engines inside those. It's just really extraordinary. If you look at Aggregators, if you look at Hooper parts on that too, nothing's in there about those. They're a key part of the value chain. But I think the key bit to it is that these new technologies should enable us to actually get out there, reach people, tell different people about different things. And so, I'm passionate about the way in which art, for example, has never had radio. It's really, really hard for people to find out about what's on in London, what's on in New York, what you can see, what you can do. It's never had anything like radio. I think the new technologies give you that, but there are a bunch of issues around there with copyright, which we have to grapple with and wrestle through, and we will get there with them.
Jeff Taylor, what do you say to that?
Well, I think copyright is certainly something that people have found complex, and more people have had to deal with in the digital age. I don't share Spencer's sort of counsel of despair that it's no longer fit for purpose. I think if you look at what's happening in the music space, which admittedly is ahead of some of the other media industries, now it's going pretty well. So we've managed, there are lots of small companies who manage to get all the licenses they need, and they're growing their businesses, and copyright's doing what it's there for, which is basically allowing the market to function so the creators get paid for what they do, so Graham gets his royalties for his TV programs. So I think we're getting over some of the teething troubles with copyright in the digital age. It's by no means perfect, and we need to keep on innovating. At the BPI, we run this thing called the Innovation Panel, where we get the digital execs in from the labels, together with startups and other people looking to launch music services. And we share research and we share insights to try and get people to launch new services that are genuinely innovative. And there's definitely been a change in mindset within the labels that they have to keep on innovating to survive. But at the same time, if you do nothing at all about piracy and illegal downloading, it's very difficult for those tech businesses to grow. And that can't be the right thing either. So it is about striking the right balance. There's some role for legislation. But as Brian said in Music Week the other week, we've got to work as much of this out with business solutions as we can. And the search engines, I totally agree with you, needs to be a big part of that. Why is it that if you search for Radiohead MP3, all the results that come up are illegal? We think the legal sites at least should be ahead of the illegal ones, and that would help grow the legal market.
Do you need some legal protection, Brian, if you're going to...
So, yeah, okay, look, for me, it's just a sign that we're not doing enough creatively and innovatively to have better solutions than what's being searched when you search Radiohead MP3. It's interesting, the copyright debate for me, for many years I was sort of spooked by the notion that copyright's been this great financial engineering tool that we've had, and that's been a really great way for particularly our young artists and those developing acts to be able to finance becoming professional artists. But the great thing about innovation again is I'm getting really excited that we can now crowdsource funding for our acts. If we put out some music out there that's free and people really like, then I can go out, we can go and talk to them on a global basis across over hundreds of countries and say, okay, you like this, come be a partner in the act, come invest in the act. And that, again, it's interesting because that then removes the copyright stronghold on being the financial engineering tool and makes it an empowered artist funding again.
Okay, we're going to throw it out to the audience whilst I try and work through the Twitter feed and see if there are any non-spam questions, but we'll take some physical questions in the room first. Microphone number 3 is going to get her hand up first, I think.
Hi there, yeah, just on sort of the role of copyright and lost sales. I think there's a general supposition that an illegal download constitutes a lost sale. If somebody isn't downloading something illegally, they would buy it. And I think that thinking led the Recording Industry Association of America to postulate that the damage done to their industry by LimeWire, the file sharing site, was up to $75 trillion, which is more money than exists in the entire world. I mean, is there a way of trying to sort of locate the actual damage and get rid of some of the kind of slightly hysterical chaff around these issues?
Can I just say something about that? I think that relates back to your question about legislation. I don't think the problem is that legislation is in itself a bad thing. I think the problem is that for some reason, every time there's legislation, there's a whole swathe of people who aren't consulted. And there are people who, it's the consumer, and people who represent the consumer. Legislation usually comes about not because of discussion, but because of lobbying, So one of the tools that's been used up until this point by the entertainment industry are these kinds of figures. And no one knows whether they're true or not. They do seem ridiculous. That's the point I was making when I talked about the 95% figure. I would like to see, as a starting point, an independent study made on exactly how much money is being lost and why. But, I don't know how easy that is. It might be impossible.
And if some kind of independent study came and said, you're actually only taking home 50% of what you could if people pay for all of your content that they consume online, would that change your mind about it?
If we found out that I was losing 50%? I guess so. I think it wouldn't change my mind. It would just make me think, well, how can I persuade those 50%, that 50% to pay me for what I do? As I say, I'd rather take an approach of pointing out something that maybe not everybody is aware of, that I need the money to survive, But it seems to me that we've come from a world where being a successful band was like winning the lottery. We've had 20 years of huge bands, and then millions of bands that no one knows about. And I always hated those huge bands, and I liked all the little bands that no one knew about. And I want to see them rewarded. And if it means that the huge bands have to take the cut, then great. Paul McGuinness said, if it goes on like this, we won't have any more U2s. Not realizing that most people thought, wow, wouldn't that be wonderful? So it's just a question of I really think that the way the internet is set up, it couldn't be impossible for people to make a decent living. Jonathan Coulton is a very good example. He's a singer-songwriter. He releases his own stuff on the web, and he released his earnings, and there's something like $200,000 a year. Now that's a pretty good, above-average wage for a musician who I'm sure the vast majority of people haven't heard of.
Does he want to go?
One point I want to make around this innovation and some of those statistics you have coming out is to talk a little bit about the games industry, which is an example of an industry which obviously gets tech, because that's what they do, they're good at it. And I think the interesting thing about the games industry is that it caught on to what the problem was going to be around things being copied quite early on. So what it invented was, it sees the highlights which the internet has. It's got community stuff, it's got server-based stuff, it's got subscription-based products. It moved fairly rapidly away from just putting out stuff which you put in a machine and press play, think of the music industry, to actually something the World of Warcraft-like play, where it is actually an immersive, it's an online, it's an experience, which actually you can't just download and get on with it. You've actually got to be part of a community. So you've actually got to think about different ways of dealing with what the internet enables you to do and how you can do that. And I think if we spent more time on that sort of stuff and less time worrying about the number of files which LimeWire distributes because it's got rubbish search at the front end, I think that's where we should be focusing more of our attention.
We'll just take another question from the audience. There's one down here, microphone 1.
It's always interesting when we have these kind of discussions that the solution always poses itself in the form of new legislation as opposed to thinking about the fact that, the internet is global. the internet knows no boundaries, no markets, yet rights are not. Rights are very territory and market-based. And Mr. Leonard, with apologies, most of my friends back in America, when the IT crowd came out reporting your show, the night it came out, not because they disrespected the quality of your work, because they just wanted it, and there was no legal access to it. And most of these people in IMD series came back and actually supported the show by DVDs or watching it when it came towards you. But that seems part of the problem, is that we keep talking about more copyright, as opposed to thinking about more distribution, wider distribution, faster.
Yeah, they're fans. It's why another thing I really don't agree with is the whole the term piracy and the way it's been co-opted as something to be proud of. I think piracy is another word that puts people at opposite ends of an unhelpful spectrum. I don't see these people as pirates. I see them as fans. And fans are, they want to see things. They're enthusiastic about things. I love those people. They're great. If they paid for it, I love them even more. But let's give them a chance and give them a way of paying for it and a way of getting it. Absolutely.
Get another contribution from the audience. The microphone too there.
So far the discussion has all been about, in a sense, passive consumption of things created elsewhere. But what about remix? What about, for example, what happens with, say, the downfall of meme on the net, where users take something that has been created by somebody else and do a parody or a spoof, which first of all is very creative sometimes, and is also very gives a great deal of enjoyment to many people, and it's a creative work in its own right. There's a very chilling impact of heavy-duty copyright legal action against that kind of creativity.
Brad, do you have a problem? I mean, obviously it's a different kind of material when it's being used.
Use of that sort of material. Again, it's great creativity being well used for people who are going to enjoy music. So the more people that we can have doing it, the better. The copyright debate is a heavy one in our industry because it has been the structure for financial engineering for so long. But I think we do have to evolve it. I saw Joe Dipple in here from UK Music earlier. Our board meetings in UK Music need to be less about legislation and copyright and more about what are we trying to do about innovation. We have to move that debate on, and we should have done it a long time ago.
That's it.
Two things. I think, first of all, you have to respect the artist's wishes. If the artist doesn't want his work messed with and put out there, you have to respect that and listen to it. You can do it in your own bathroom, that's fine. But you can't sort of take the mic and push it out there. Having said that, I think you're raising actually one of the core issues, which is the framework for rights at the moment doesn't give people that sort of option. So I would rather actually that all this money which is spent looking at how we're going to change copyright legislation actually was given to someone really smart who's really looking at this stuff, like Creative Commons, who actually have thought through all the issues around attribution, how you want to deal with remixes, whether or not you want to make money, and actually get them to start thinking about how you can push some of this stuff forward. Because you have to respect the artist's rights, but you're right, the great thing about digital is it means that people can get out there, show their appreciation, show that they're fans, and get out there. But you have to somehow find a rights framework which will deal with that. The nearest to it I know of is definitely Creative Commons.
I mean, something like the downfall video. I mean, there's genuine innovation and artistic endeavours going into all of those parodies, however much it might infuriate people who produce the film, isn't it?
Well, I think we definitely need to make it easier for people to interact with music. And you made a point about games. Games are inherently interactive, which I think gives them an advantage in the digital space in terms of dealing with piracy. But for recorded music, my personal view is if people want to interact with it, great. If they want to do that for fun at home, great. We need to make that easier. There will be some interactions that the artist will find really repugnant. You don't necessarily want the BNP doing something with your piece of music, or, Graham might have similar objections. So there has to be some ability for the artist to object. But essentially, we want it to be able to happen. If someone starts making money out of it, then I think the original artist should be paid for their contribution to whatever is new that is created. But we need to find ways to do that, and within UK Music, we're looking at that. Coming back to the point about losses from piracy, etc. I think the LimeWire case, I think the reason there was that, I agree, an absurd number, was because of the statutory damages provisions in US copyright law that basically mean there's a fixed amount per infringement and it totals up to some huge number. At the BPI, we've never said, and we don't agree, that every illegal download is something that would have been bought. Clearly, it isn't. We think there are about, the last piece of research we did, 1.2 billion downloads illegally of music every year in the UK. And you can actually get that reasonably correct because you do massive market surveys and you can see how many people visit. Every month we track the number of visitors to all the major pirate sites, and it's a pretty consistent picture. There are about 7 million people or so regularly illegally downloading music, and you can ask them how many files they download, and you can come up with a pretty good picture on a nationally representative basis of how much of it is going on. In terms of how much that loses to the industry, clearly you have to do some modelling on what those people spend compared to what other people spend. That's why we reckon in the UK, piracy will lose a couple of £100 million, and we're a £1 billion industry. So we don't think those are absurd numbers at all. We think that reflects what's going on. We don't think we'll be able to eliminate piracy in any way. A large part of the solution has to be education. A large part has to be better services. We're trying to do all that. But there is a role also for tackling the illegal pirate sites. Sites like Pirate Bay that are making money on the back of the work of creative people, I don't think should be able to get away with it.
Now, there's a point on Twitter, which I think probably a lot of people would agree with, where Pete Woodbridge is saying the biggest threat to the music industry isn't piracy, it's Apple, who take 30% of all profits. Now, whether you want to target Apple in particularly as the way in which people are able to legally buy music, a lot of people do feel angry about that, don't they, Brian?
Yeah, I'm not quite so sure myself, because Apple is an organisation that takes a retail margin that you can do a non-exclusive deal with as a creator. So you can sell whatever you like off your own website. For those fans and the super fans, you can then go mop up casual punters through Apple or any other services. It's there for those people that want to consume and have customer habits that, okay, I'll go on iTunes and buy that. You know, other people will go to our new sites and they'll go to bandofskulls.com and go through the pain of going through the site because they want to do the So Apple is for me it's a good sales channel that allows people to be able to access music, and for us as artists, we can give them content. You know, technology has made the creation of content so much cheaper nowadays. So it's easy for us to do a deal with Apple and with any other retailer. So, you know, great.
I take your point about they're taking a retail share, but because they're retailing in such a different way from when we all used to go and buy vinyl records, people are resentful out there of the share that they take. They don't think they're earning it.
I think there's a specific issue around in-app purchases from the App Store where Apple take their cut. I think that cut is pretty high. But overall, Apple, I think, have certainly been very good for the music industry. They've created an ecosystem that's great to use, that lots of people are using, that's contributing, you know, hundreds of millions of pounds a year into our business now. So, to be honest, we'd love to see Google launch such a great music service.
Yeah. Again, for someone who's trading in physical goods and digital, what I love about it is no returns. You know, the digital world is simple, it's easy accounting. The physical world, for me, still is a nightmare. The sooner we get physical stock just being something that an artist creates great packaging and that they're selling the physical, which is an easy area to get into or be in, the better. You know, the high street is a tough place where you're shipping physical goods, sale or return. Some of it's coming back 2 years later. It's very difficult. So, you know, more digital.
Okay, we have another question down the front.
Hello. Yes, it's David Stubbs from the Music Managers Forum. I agree with everything that Brian has said. I think it's absolutely brilliant. But I also have some sympathy with Jeff as well. What we're seeing is that the content creators and the organisations that market content, and also the artists and the authors, are suffering at the moment because of the digital situation we're in. Every year, record companies' income goes down. On the other hand, the aggregators of content, and here is, I would say, for example, Google with YouTube, the Pirate Bay, Apple's iTunes, Amazon, the Huffington Post, are all doing extremely well. And they are not the creators of content, they are the aggregators and the distributors of content. So we have to get some balance somehow, or a better balance, between the creators of content and the aggregators of content. And it has to be, to an extent, a carrot and stick situation. So you have to have a little bit of stick with your legislation, but you also have to have all the innovation with the carrot. And I just wondered what the panel thought about that.
Do we need a stick?
Well, the sticks that exist at the moment are terrible. There are things like, those piracy warnings at the start of DVDs, and, they tend to make the person who's legitimately bought the product feel like a criminal, and free strikes is a terrible stick. It's just all these awful sticks.
So is there any sticks that can work?
Yes, I think the better stick is the education and having frameworks. And it's what you were saying. It's basically treat people like fans, respect them, respect the artists. I mean, that's what copyright was originally there for. Start respecting them, and you'll get it going both ways. And I'm on this aggregator point. I'm a little bit torn on this one because if you look at the music industry, the artists have never had that easier time. It's just now that instead of it being, the labels who make all the money, there are some artists who do, but it's more, the aggregators and the retailers. But I think, the real trick in this overall thing is how do you get more money back to the artists? How do you get them more respected? I mean, I think now, the boot is on the other foot. It's no longer the labels who are all-powerful and can do everything. It is, the search engines, it is the retailers. But it's the artists who we should really be focusing on. It's basically helping them reach out, make new sales, get new art, get new fans.
Love that exists, that's out there when you see something by a favourite creator launching something on Kickstarter, and you get, there's a guy, I can't remember his name, maybe someone will help me, who did Double Fine Games. He did a recent Kickstarter campaign to try and bring back point-and-click adventure games that he couldn't get financing for because they're no longer fashionable. And he raised, does anyone know the number? 3 million, was it? 3 million. In how many days? 28 days? 3 million in 28 days. So there's a lot of goodwill out there, and it's because he went on Kickstarter with an amusing, humble, just a great video to kind of drum up the business, And I think there's an idea that there's something humiliating about going cap in hand to the consumers and saying, could you help us out? But why? Why is that a bad thing? Why is that a bad way of doing business? I think films would, I've said this on Twitter, so it's not an original point for me, but I think films would get a lot better if people paid leaving the cinema. There's a whole business plan that involves opening terrible films in millions of screens and then shutting them just as word of mouth kicks in. Big films are opened that way. Big terrible films are opened that way. And if this new world means the end of that kind of industry, then I hope it happens fast.
Okay, we should probably leave it there. It's warm, in case anybody hasn't noticed, but we can head out to the foyer for some lunch. And after we've said thank you very much to our panel, thank you very much.